21st century sensibility that sees all kinds of rich opportunities for higher education, in particular high school education in part, that can take advantage of this rich diversity. Now, what is the purpose of higher education? Clearly, we have to teach certain skills. Clearly, we have to address the knowledge bases that people need to be successful when they graduate college. But I think the purpose of higher education goes beyond that. And the purpose of higher education, again, I told you I'm from the social sciences. I'm from a school that thought, intellectual warfare was fair game. There are three goals, I think, of being tied uniquely to higher education. One, the recognition and response to globalism. We live in a different world than our parents. Our parents were very comfortable being confined to the hearth and home of the white picket fence and so on. But our entire lives are dictated, are structured by trends in the global system. And by that, I mean not only the global economy. We all know that. The clothes we wear. I tell my students, if I ask you all to leave behind everything that comes from somewhere other than the United States, let alone Illinois, you'd be arrested as soon as you walk out the door because you'd be naked as a paper. But even our culture, our way of thinking, the food we eat is profoundly influenced by being part of this larger global system. And if we aren't aware of that, and if we don't prepare our students to be able to live in a globalized society, we're doing a great misjustice to them. They will not be able to fully appreciate what is out there, nor will they be able to be terribly successful. So first, globalism. Now, globalism is not only, coming up with a map and this is where these countries are. Globalism is the global realm of culture, the global realm of ideas, of music. All that should be a major thrust of what we do in higher education. So first we have, I'm old school. By the way, I have all this nice, neat thing. I'm going to put it on PowerPoint. I'm a Luddite. I couldn't do it. So. I told my students, a trick of note-taking is whenever a teacher puts something on a board, that usually means it's important. So put it on your paper and underline it and then figure out what comes from it. So the first goal, I think, this is a governor's take pen. Fortunately, I brought one of my own. Is globalism. The second one is complex interdependency. And by that, I mean something much broader than is often offered in the literature. Complex interdependency is the ability to recognize that the world is much more complex than we are taught it is. That it is not simply a question of people of Arizona versus non-documented immigrants. It is not simply the United States against the European Union or against Iraq or whatever. I'm a political scientist. But complex interdependency forces us to look beyond what seems to be apparent and see the connections between everything. And this is very important. This is a higher order of thinking. As we graduate from college, this ability to see complex interdependency in everything is amazing. We use an expression, and I heard some of the students, if you were in the Sherman Recital Hall, mention this, that part of the Title V grant for them meant networking. The concept of networking is an extension of this notion of complex interdependency. Everything is interconnected. Rosario, I didn't even know he was going to be here today. I haven't seen him for probably 3 years. And the world is very rich in all these interdependencies. And interdependency is a way of recognizing also mutual relationships in doing that. Complex interdependency. Let me give you a couple examples of what I teach in my classes. Again, I'm a political scientist who teaches comparative and international politics. In 1983, Mexico was on the verge of bankruptcy. In 1983, Mexico had $90 billion in foreign debt. The government of Mexico declares a moratorium, not on the repayment of the loans, but on the repayment of the interest on those loans. Complex interdependency. Continental Bank of Illinois almost goes under because of that. Many of these loans have been extended by Continental Bank, and it hurt Continental Bank. So what happens? How did Mexico get out of that? Does anybody remember how Mexico got out of that debt crisis, which one could argue they are still in? The internet, what?
The drug trade?
Well, not the drug trade. Maybe that contributes somewhat to it. But the International Monetary Fund stepped in. Many of you hopefully are keeping track of what's happening in Greece, and what are people doing in reaction to the IMF stepping into Greece? Anybody catching the news?
The people
what?
The people in Greece or people outside?
In Greece.
Fighting back.
They're fighting, they're taking to the streets, they're rioting, they're really upset about this. Because the IMF, in the United States we hear, oh, the IMF stepped in, all will be well. But if you are a person living in Mexico in '83 or living in Greece in 2010, IMF means before we lend you this money, you have to go through belt-tightening measures. And it's usually very draconian belt-tightening measures. Cut back the subsidies on cornmeal. Now for Mexico, cutting back on subsidies for cornmeal and cutting back on subsidies for public transportation, the subway in Mexico City, or cutting back on subsidies for higher education, were very destabilizing. Students did not take well to the fact that their tuitions jumped dramatically, especially at the better universities in Mexico and so on. This is all complex interdependency. So IMF steps in and says we have to do all these draconian budget cuts. And on top of that, you have to change your policy toward foreign investment. I would argue, and this is my bias, Mexico had a very progressive theory on foreign investment. Their theory used to be, if you invested in Mexico, you had to keep the majority of your profit in Mexico. Okay. That means you had to keep 50% plus 1 of your profit in Mexico. Otherwise, many nation states don't have that restriction. In many nation states, a foreign company invests in a country, they make a lot of money, and the term they use is they repatriate that money. They send that money back to whatever not the host country, but the investing country was, in this case, the United States. I think it's a they didn't say how you had to keep your profit in Mexico. They didn't say you had to reinvest it. They didn't say you had to spend money, buy Mexican goods with it, but the money had to stay in Mexico. Now, IMF said that's an infringement on free trade, and you have to stop that. So Mexico was forced to lift this restriction on foreign investment. As a result of this gesture by IMF, there was something called NAFTA. NAFTA would not have been possible if Mexico did not go into a debt crisis, if they did not have to borrow from IMF, and if IMF did not impose these restrictions on Mexico. Is NAFTA good for Mexico?
No.
Big debate, big debate. I would argue probably not. We know that there has been Mexican economic growth as a result of NAFTA. We also know the gap between Mexico and the United States has increased phenomenally as a result of NAFTA. Okay, so this is an example of complex interdependency. To move away from the isolated event, what you see on the headline of the newspaper, and see how everything is interrelated. The Mexican crisis of '83, Continental Bank of Illinois, which eventually did go bankrupt, by the way, and the changing of the foreign investment laws in Mexico, allowing for the eventual passage of NAFTA. I would argue perhaps maybe all parties were hurt by NAFTA, but certainly not the way Ross Perot argued. What did Ross Perot say would happen? I remember the colorful phrase. He said there would be a sucking sound from the south of the border, that jobs would be sucked out of the United States into Mexico. There's been a redefining or a sharpening of the division of labor between Mexico and the United States. We have developed our high-tech